Today's spotlight will be a spiritually nutritious chunk of meat. I hope you stay with me today through the end. There are many decent commentaries about Jacob chapter 5, which quotes the allegory of the tame and wild olive trees by Zenos, who was an Old Testament era prophet. He is the most quoted prophet, second to Isaiah. I counted the number of the words of Zenos as quoted by Jacob in his allegory, which comes to approximately 3,733 words. This does not include the approximately 10 other times which he was quoted by other Book of Mormon prophets like Nephi, Alma, and another Nephi who was Helaman's son. So instead of discussing the usual doctrinal points, I will address what I consider to be paramount in his message. There are about 8 points in time where the master of the vineyard declares in the following verses the word perhaps. So in Jacob chapter 5, verse 4, we read, "And it came to pass that the master of the vineyard went forth, and he saw that his olive tree began to decay, and he said, I will prune it, and dig about it, and nourish it, that perhaps it may shoot forth young and tender branches, and it perish not." In verse 11, we read, "And the Lord of the vineyard caused that it should be digged about, and pruned, and nourished, saying unto his servant, It grieveth me that I should lose this tree, wherefore that perhaps I might preserve the roots thereof, that they perish not, that I might preserve them unto myself. I have done this thing." In verse 27 we read, "But behold, the servant said unto him, Let us prune it, and dig about it, and nourish it a little longer, that perhaps it may bring forth good fruit unto thee, that thou canst lay it up against the season." In verse 53, we read, "And this will I do, that the tree may not perish, that perhaps I may preserve unto myself the roots thereof for mine own purpose." Verse 54, "And behold, the roots of the natural branches of the tree which I planted whithersoever I would are yet alive. Wherefore, that I may preserve them also for mine own purpose, I will take of the branches of this tree, and I will graft them in unto them. Yea, I will graft in unto them the branches of their mother tree, that I may preserve the roots also unto mine own self, that when they shall be sufficiently strong, perhaps they may bring forth good fruit unto me." Verse 59, "And this I do, that perhaps the roots thereof may take strength because of their goodness, and because of the change of the branches, that the good may overcome the evil." Now in verse 60 we read, "And because that I have preserved the natural branches and the roots thereof, and that I have grafted in the natural branches again into their mother tree, and have preserved the roots of their mother tree, that perhaps the trees of my vineyard may bring forth again good fruit, and that I may have joy again in the fruit of my vineyard, and perhaps that I may rejoice exceedingly, that I have preserved the roots and the branches of the first fruit." I have quoted each instance where the Lord uses the word perhaps in order to emphasize something to you. But first, I have to paint a picture. The old tree had branches that were barren and lofty, taking the strength of the roots to themselves. They were good for nothing but to be burned. All they did was cumber the vineyard. But God wants good fruit, not just fruit, but good fruit. Right now, with all the work that is going on in the church to gather Israel, something very undesirable has been happening for a very long time, which is the result of the greedy, selfish nature of those lofty, barren branches. There will come a point very soon where the Lord will do his own work, which will be more great and marvelous than we have yet seen. For this, we must read verses 72 through 75, which I will read with special emphasis on some key concepts, so please bear with me. "And it came to pass that the servants did go and labor with their mights, and the Lord of the vineyard labored also with them. And they did obey the commandments of the Lord of the vineyard in all things. And there began to be the natural fruit again in the vineyard, and the natural branches began to grow and thrive exceedingly, and the wild branches began to be plucked off and to be cast away. And they did keep the root and the top thereof equal, according to the strength thereof. And thus they labored with all diligence according to the commandments of the Lord of the vineyard, even until the bad had been cast away out of the vineyard, and the Lord had preserved unto himself that the trees had become again the natural fruit, and they became like unto one body, and the fruits were equal. And the Lord of the vineyard had preserved unto himself the natural fruit, which was most precious unto him from the beginning. And it came to pass that when the Lord of the vineyard saw that his fruit was good, and that his vineyard was no more corrupt, he called up his servants and said unto them, Behold, for this last time have we nourished my vineyard, and thou beholdest that I have done according to my will. And I have preserved the natural fruit, that it is good, even like as it was in the beginning. And blessed art thou, for because ye have been diligent in laboring with me in my vineyard, and have kept my commandments, and have brought unto me again the natural fruit, that my vineyard is no more corrupted, and the bad is cast away. Behold, ye shall have joy with me because of the fruit of my vineyard. Now verse 76 talks about the millennium. For behold, for a long time will I lay up of the fruit of my vineyard unto mine own self against the season, which speedily cometh, and for the last time I have nourished my vineyard, and pruned it, and dug about it, and dunged it. Wherefore I will lay up unto mine own self of the fruit for a long time, according to that which I have spoken. There were no more lofty, barren branches. The fruits were good because they were equal, and because they were equal, they were no more corrupt. But the Lord did not force the fruit to be good and to be equal. He labored throughout the allegory to give the branches the opportunity to be equal and fruitful, and did not joy in them when they had exalted themselves. We have free agency to learn to become equal in temporal things, so that God will make us equal in heavenly things. He declared this in 1832 in D&C section 78. I will only read 2 verses. In verses 6 and 7 we read, For if ye are not equal in earthly things, ye cannot be equal in obtaining heavenly things. For if you will that I give unto you a place in the celestial world, you must prepare yourselves by doing the things which I have commanded you and required of you. 2 years later, God declared this in section 105. Please bear with me as I read verses 1 through 6. Verily I say unto you who have assembled yourselves together, that you may learn my will concerning the redemption of mine afflicted people. Behold, I say unto you, were it not for the transgressions of my people, speaking concerning the church, and not individuals, they might have been redeemed even now. But behold, they have not learned to be obedient to the things which I required at their hands, but are full of all manner of evil, and do not impart of their substance as becometh saints to the poor and afflicted among them, and are not united according to the union required by the law of the celestial kingdom. And Zion cannot be built up unless it is by the principles of the law of the celestial kingdom. Otherwise I cannot receive her unto myself. And my people must needs be chastened until they learn obedience, if it must needs be by the things which they suffer. In Moses chapter 7, we read that God called his people Zion because they were one heart, one mind. They dwelt in righteousness, and there was no poor among them. This is important. Now that I have painted a picture of what God expects of us, I can explain why he kept saying perhaps throughout the allegory. He did everything for us and continues to do everything for us. He gives us every opportunity to produce good fruit, but he will not compel us to produce fruit. We must exercise our free agency to be one of those few servants who labors with him. As we read in the allegory to the conclusion, eventually some branches begin to produce good fruit equally. They are those who make the necessary sacrifices, who, rather than take strength unto themselves, like those barren, lofty branches, exalting themselves, they freely give to the poor until there are no more poor, and all have made themselves equal in temporal things. The rest are cast away into the fire, being barren, lofty, and profitable to themselves, but unprofitable to the Lord.